What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by special guest Joe Doyle from Future Stars series, also the host of Overslot, kind of a guy that I go to on international free agency, MLB draft, prospect ranking. So, Joe, we appreciate you joining us. How are you enjoying kind of this lull between the activity of free agency and spring training, seemingly a few weeks away?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on the show, Jeff. It's nice to be on the show for the first time. Not really a lull for me because I'm prepping for the college baseball season, the high school baseball season. It's kind of my bread and butter. So, yeah, but baseball in general, right around the corner, just a few weeks.
It's exciting stuff. And I guess I should have clarified. If you're an international free agency guy, MLB draft guy, farm system guy, this is kind
Yeah.
of, you're starting to see all the rankings have come out, that sort of thing. So let me just jump in. International free agency sort of, I was going to say finished up. Technically, it just started, but it feels like 95% of this stuff happens on day one. The Dodgers' top signing, Emil Morales. You are higher on him than it seems like most people are. I think Fangraphs is pretty high on him as well. You have him as the number 2 guy in this class. So to most Dodger fans, this is maybe a name they've seen on Twitter in the last week or so. But talk to us about Morales and maybe what it is that gets you especially excited.
Yeah, so I want to clarify. I don't travel to the Dominican Republic. I don't travel to Venezuela. I don't get a chance to see these guys firsthand. I do most of my sourcing and scouting, at least on the international side, through speaking with international scouting directors, international scouts, things like that. And so I try to collect as much information as I can over the course of, well, for every class, probably over the course of 16 to 18 months, talking about these players and watching them develop from the time they're 15, 16, 17 years old. When I was brought on to Emil Morales, it was probably about 10 or 12 months ago. It wasn't that long ago, but at that point, he was more in the 10 to 12 range. People had some concerns about the body. People had some concerns about the connectivity at the plate. He's gotten very, very strong. He's gotten very, very big. 6'3", barrel chested, broad shoulders, ton of bat speed. The hands are starting to really work at the plate. Power projection is starting to show. I think people are very, very high on the ability for this guy to hit and this guy to hit for power at the next level. Now, over the last 6 to 8 months, the projection of him staying at shortstop has certainly fallen by the wayside. I think most people think, considering the projection in his lower half and the size of his upper half, he's probably going to shift to third base, maybe even left or right field at the next level. But I mean, at this stage, if you're buying a 16, 17 year old prospect, you want the bat. You're looking for someone that's going to impact the lineup. And I think Emil Morales, you could make the case Emil Morales is a top 3, 4 bat in this class. And you stamp on the fact that he's a shortstop and he shoots up to number 2 or 3 in the class for me.
Dodger fans are well familiar with guys who start out as shortstops and quickly get moved off of shortstop as they make their way through the system. This isn't a unique thing to Dodgers fans, but I feel like you just described every Dodgers shortstop prospect of the last 5 or 6 years. We'll see. Gavin Lux still experimentally in the shortstop phase. I guess Corey Seager panned out, although even when he panned out, it was, well, he might end up at third base.
Yeah, for sure. No, Corey Seager, a massive shortstop, ends up at third base, 6'4". I think that's what you might be looking at. I'm not saying that's the type of production that you're going to get from Emil Morales, but at the end of the day, you might be talking about a 6'4", 210-pound, athlete who has to play on a corner, which is not a bad thing when you consider the hit tool and the power. I mean, there are scouting directors that I spoke to that said it could be a 55 hit, 60 power, which translates to that's a 265, 270 guy that has 25 home run upside. They said if the body goes backwards, it could turn into a Marcell Ozuna type of a frame, which ends up in left field or right field. But at the end of the day, I mean, you look at Ozuna's bat. Would you take that in an international class? Of course.
Yeah, I love that. The other guy of note that it feels like the Dodgers signed in this class, I believe they're up to 19 total signings last I saw, but Rafi Peguero was the other sort of, he doesn't seem like he's a top 50 guy on most lists, which we'll talk about here in a second, but he was the other guy that the Dodgers signed that had a bonus of note. I believe it was like 350,000 was the reported signing fee for him. So do you have anything on Peguero, and is he a guy that Dodger fans should be excited about?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So Peguero, definitely a bigger body guy. He's not going to be a guy that necessarily stays up the middle of the field, but it's the bat, right? It's the sweet right-handed swing. It's power to all fields. It's pull side juice. He's using right center. Not a lot of times what you'll find with some of these international prospects is the swing gets very long. The hands get away from the body and it's kind of hard to project. he's compact. He's got tight turns. He uses right center field. I think again you're betting on the bat here, but certainly not the high level prospect that Emil Morales is. But it should have the floor of a guy who can bang a little bit.
One thing that's unique to the Dodgers, oh, I shouldn't say this, it's not probably not unique to the Dodgers, but to Dodgers fans who only kind of pay attention. Of late, when I see a guy like Morales ranked top 5, top 10, top 15, there's almost some skepticism because the Dodgers have seemed to be unsuccessful with these guys that are ranked so highly on these lists. A bunch of the best international free agent signing the Dodgers have are, would not be a guy I would even know the name of today. And it's 2 years from now. It's like, holy smokes, this guy jumped. Would you say to a Dodger fan, is that just the normal experience? Hey, these are 16, 17-year-old kids. And so the variance is dramatically, everybody is experiencing what Dodger fans are experiencing. Is that fair?
Without question. I mean, these kids, and I call them kids. They're a year and a half younger than even the guys taken out of high school in the MLB draft. I mean, their
Yeah.
bodies are still transforming, and there's a huge assimilation and acclimation to not only professional baseball but the United States stateside baseball. There's a language barrier. There's a lot of things that go into these guys transitioning into professional ball. But I would also argue you look at some of the other guys that the Dodgers have brought on, Diego Cartaya, Andy Pages, Josue De Paula, like they may not be hitting on the quote unquote top guys, but the Dodgers are one of the premier organizations in baseball in terms of just hitting on those guys in general, developing those guys. So it may not be the top guy every year, but they're doing a nice job on the international front.
I love it. Well, let me get the question to you that I'm most interested about when it comes to international free agency. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but I'm looking at the Dodgers, a team that traditionally has 2, if not 3, of the top international free agency prospects. It feels like every single year. This year, they've got 1 of the top 50 on most these sort of, I guess, if there was a consensus board out there, it would just be Morales. 19 total signings, only one other guy with kind of a bonus of note. The Dodgers had 5.3 million to spend this year, which is more than they had to spend last year. And it feels like they're maybe, at a 3 million, 3.5 million of that. I think the optimistic Dodger fans are saying, there's a notable guy who might become an international free agent that might get posted in the next 12 months. And while if he comes over, Roki Sasaki, it's not going to be because he wants to make the most money. Obviously, he would just wait 2 years to do that. But are you connecting any of those dots that maybe the Dodgers are saying, hey, we know you're not going to make the most money, but we'd like to be able to offer you, more than just the minimum amount possible? Is that a crazy connection that folks like me are making?
You know, I think there may be something there. I look at it this way as well. The Dodgers don't have a top 10 bonus guy for 2025 right now either. So if we were to stretch into that period, and let's say Roki were to sign after that period opens up, the Dodgers are always a team that seems to have one of the top 10 type bonus guys in 2025. So yeah, I mean, I think it's more than a coincidence. Let's put it that way. I mean, look at the San Diego Padres landed the number 1 prospect on the international front in 2022. They landed the number 1 prospect on the international front in 2023. They do not have a top 10 prospect for 2024, or I guess 2025 if you want to look at it that way. So I think they're and the Braves too. The Braves are kind of oddly positioned. There are teams that generally have a top guy that don't seem to have a top guy next year, which I think is I guess a little bit ironic. Now, I'll caution the Dodgers fans by saying one thing. Roki Sasaki is going to make so much money in sponsorships and so much money off of the baseball field that I don't know if an extra 1.5 or $2 million signing bonus is really going to push him over the edge. I mean, I look back at I think it was 2016. The Seattle Mariners traded tons of players off their major league roster to have the largest bonus pool possible for the international signing period with Shohei Ohtani. Ultimately, he signed for less money to play for the Los Angeles Angels. I think it just depends on where a player wants to play now. The Dodgers have Shohei Ohtani. They have Yamamoto. Kind of hard for them not to be the favorite for Roki Sasaki right now, money totally aside.
Yeah, and it's a reminder too that the Dodgers, if Sasaki were to be posted sometime between now and middle of next January, the signing period we're currently in, the Dodgers could
Mhm.
go and trade players for additional money if they felt like that was a need. They did that at the end of the middle of the last signing period to go sign a kid out of Korea. So they kind of have some experience in doing that. But it just, again, I'm like, they're usually crushing it and spending all of their money very, very quickly in international free agency, and they haven't this year. Let's shift to the Dodgers farm system. I want to ask you about a couple guys that have recently been acquired, because as these trades have happened, I'm following you and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Joe said this. Joe said this. So let's go backwards. Trey Sweeney, a guy that the Dodgers acquire from the Yankees. You called him, quote, a scary get. Talk to me about why you are excited about. It seems like both the combination of raw tools in Sweeney and Dodgers player development.
Yeah, so I currently have my top 30s will come out in a few weeks, but I currently have Trey Sweeney in the 9 to 10 range. He may move a
Okay.
little bit, but this is the way that I look at it. He's a big bodied shortstop, may move to third base. Exit velos have ticked up every single year after he got drafted, and he was the model darling. I mean, this guy was the data darling in the 2020, I think it was the 2021 draft now that I look back at it. Huge exit velos, huge tight launch angle dispersions, plus runner in college. Like I think if there was ever a guy who was loaded up with tools and a big projectable body, and it just hasn't quite clicked yet in professional baseball. If there's an organization that's going to unlock something with Trey
Yeah.
Sweeney, it feels like it's going to be the Dodgers. And so I personally don't know where he's going to play. I don't think he's a shortstop. Maybe he's a large second baseman like a DJ LeMahieu, or maybe he shifts to third base, but I just think there is more to unlock in terms of impact at the plate that Trey Sweeney has shown back in his college days, and to a lesser extent in 2023, that he may be scratching the surface of this year. I just think he's a prospect to watch. I think he's pretty far off the top 100 radar for the time being, but I tell you what, he's not too far off my top 150. I think he's going to be a guy that could really surge in a new uniform.
The other trade that the Dodgers make, they go and acquire Jackson Ferris and Zier Hope. You can take this wherever you want. One thing you said that caught my attention was the fact that Hope was a guy some people had labeled as a pitcher, and some people
Mhm.
thought very highly of him as a pitcher. So, talk to me a little bit about Hope and Ferris, two guys that Dodgers fans are kind of newly getting acquainted with.
Yeah, Ferris is going to rank inside the top 10 comfortably with the Dodgers. I mean, it's an issue where the secondaries haven't performed quite like people thought they might directly out of high school. It's a big curveball, it's a hammer curveball, but it needs to add a little bit of firmness and up the command on that pitch. Fastball is really good if it's commanded a bit better. It's mostly been fringe average command to this point. So the arm talent is unbelievable. The stuff has always been there. Now it's just about throwing better strikes. I think there's certainly a chance that Jackson Ferris ends up in the bullpen just because of his concerns with command. But
Yeah.
you put him in the bullpen and you let him let it rip. Jackson Ferris could be a guy that's 96 to 98 from the left side with an 80-mile-an-hour curveball. So we'll see what happens there. I think he's going to be a development challenge for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think that'd be the right word for it. Zaire Hope is the interesting one. I think I was the highest in the industry on him in the draft. I think I had him in like the 132 or 135 range. I don't have it in front of me, but I had a scouting director about 3 or 4 weeks before the draft. I obviously won't say who. They had an $800,000 value on him. Now,
Wow.
obviously, they didn't end up going that direction. And once you pass that slot, people watching this are probably going, why didn't they take him in the fourth? Why didn't they take him in the fifth? Once you pass that slot, money gets very, very complicated in the draft, and you got to figure out how you're going to, get to that point. He ended up taking like 400 or 450,000 from the Cubs a little bit later on in the draft, up to 96 from the left side, and it's a live arm. It's a really loose electric arm. The question on Zaire was always going to be, is he going to hit? There's certainly power projection. There's bat speed. Um, I would be surprised if the Dodgers didn't throw him on the mound and see what they've got, but it's very, very interesting, Clay. And yeah, honestly, if I was a Dodgers fan, and I'm not, I might be more excited at the idea of Zaire Hope than what Jackson Ferris could become.
Interesting.
That's maybe it's a hot take, but that's just where I'm at with the kid.
No, when I've read about Hope, he feels like, and even we've got a guy who kind of focuses specifically on Dodgers prospects who comes on our show from time to time. And, you know, someone asked, hey, where do you have Hope ranked in your Dodger thing? And he's like, you know, he's working on it. It could be anywhere from like 25 to 50. But he's like, but man, you just look at the clay that the Dodgers just have been handed. And it does feel like, hey, give me a guy that, you know, rises 15 to 20 spots in the Dodgers prospect rankings in the next 6 months. It feels like he's one of the first names that's going to come out of a lot of people's mouths just because of what you're getting at. That feels like there's potential, and now combined with the organization that's probably best at unlocking that. Is that fair?
I mean, it's ironic you say that. I mentioned where I had Ferris. I have Zier Hope at 19, so he's
Okay.
going to be 10 spots higher than your guy. I'm obviously a bit more bullish on the upside than I am the track record. He
Okay.
barely has any professional
Right.
baseball under his belt, but I'm going to always take the tools. I'm going to take the word that scouting directors provided me during his amateur career, and I'm going to see where this thing goes.
Well, you're mentioning your top 30. And the last question I wanted to ask you, which is kind of a choose your own adventure here for yourself, is as you look at the system, you just mentioned Hope is a guy that it sounds like you're probably going to be higher on than most other places when these lists come out. Are there guys that come to mind when you think about the Dodgers system that either maybe you're higher on than consensus or lower on than consensus?
Well, the first guy that comes to mind is Josue Dupala. I think he's a top 75 prospect in the entire game. I think he's going to hit for power. I think he can run. I think he can throw. He's a ways off, but I just think in general the industry is a little low on him. He's a slam dunk top 5 prospect in that organization from my eyes. Down the list a little bit, a couple of guys. Dylan Campbell is a guy that I think everyone needs to watch out for. Like, that kid at Texas was so good in multiple roles, and the way that their lineup shook out, the way that they needed to get bats in there, he shifted from second base to the outfield to left field, and they had to do that with all sorts of guys. I'll be interested to see whether or not they stick him in the outfield or if they stick him at second base. I think he's fully capable at both spots, but Dylan Campbell is the guy that's going to hit, and he's going to run, and he's going to do a little bit of everything pretty darn good. Would not surprise me if Dylan Campbell ended up being, the 24th guy on the roster and starting 90 games for the Dodgers in 2027. He's just a ball player. He's a gritty ball player with a swing that projects to hit. I think the other guy that I would probably throw out that I think is still pretty far away is Peter Hubick. Always
Okay.
been enamored by the data, always been enamored by the body, or by the frame, however you want to say it. I'd like to see Hubick put on some weight. It seems as though it's been a struggle for him to put on strength and weight, and kind of up his durability. But, the fastball, curveball, tunneling traits, and everything that he can do with those two pitches, like, that's mid rotation upside if he can ever get the physical part of his craft down.
Two more. Diego Cartaya. This is a polarizing guy in prospect circles right now. He's basically fallen off of every top 100 list a year after guys like Keith Law were like, hey, this guy might be the top 5 prospect in baseball in 12 months. Where are you at on him? Obviously, the last year was bad. Like, are you out on Cartaya? Are you wait and see mode, or are you still sort of buying up stock where you can find it?
I wouldn't say I'm buying up stock. My thing with Cartaya is he's still young. Like, I
Yeah.
think he had such a bad year last year, and his batted ball outcomes weren't quite as bad as the actual at bats themselves. Listen, this is a wait and see year for me for Cartaya. I don't know if he's necessarily the special prospect that a lot of people kind of labeled him. He's certainly not in the camp of a Moreno or someone like that. But I'll put it this way: if I was buying stock, I would probably just buy stock in the bat from Dalton Rushing rather than go after Diego Cartaya at this point. Um,
Yeah.
but I certainly haven't given up on him. I mean, he's so young, he's so talented. There's no reason to kind of give up on it at this early stage. Might not be the blue chipper that we all thought, but I still think he's a big leaguer.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy just because he's like the third best catching prospect in the Dodgers system now. They've got two other
Right.
catchers that are now top 100 prospects, depending on where you look. Last question for you: Dodgers pitching at the top of the farm system, kind of leaking into major league type stuff. I'll take Bobby Miller out of this category because I think Bobby Miller's in a league of his own. If we're talking Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Nick Frasso, those types of names at the top of the Dodgers farm system, is there a guy that you like the most as far as long-term bet? If I had to pick one of these guys, who would you pick?
Emmett
And maybe
Sheehan,
if
for
I didn't
sure.
mention a name, throw,
It's Emmett Sheehan.
Okay.
It's I mean, if you're taking Bobby Miller off the table, it's
Yeah.
Emmett Sheehan by quite a bit. My only thing with Sheehan is, can he get a third pitch to the point where it can be an actual weapon?
Okay.
Because like I'm a sucker for guys that are just different breeds. Like they're built different in the way that they present to a batter. Emmett Sheehan has the low launch. He's got the fastball that carries through the zone, and that has been the outlier meta in Major League Baseball and minor league baseball for like 3 or 4 years now, and the league can't seem to adjust to it. Eyes at the plate just can't seem to hit that elevated fastball with a flat vertical approach angle. Nobody can do it. Nobody can adjust to it. So Emmett Sheehan for me would certainly be my pick. I think he's got number 3 upside in the same vein as a guy like Brian Wu in Seattle. Like they're very similar players. Like they both need to establish a third pitch. They're both low launchers. They can both ride it up into the high 90s. I love those two. But I'll tell you the guy that I really like in the Dodgers system that is admittedly a ways off is Ronan Cobb.
Okay.
That when I scouted him in high or in I guess in high school and at the JUCO level, I think it was JUCO level. He might have been college. He did not know where the ball was going. He had no clue, no clue. But the stuff was huge, and now it's
Yeah.
like this is probably a 6 fastball. It might be a 55 curve, 55 slide piece. That would be a guy that if they give him the time to stay in a rotation and don't rush him up to the big leagues, I still think Ronan Kopp has back end of the rotation stuff with maybe a high number 4 if the command takes an unsuspected jump.
How big of you mentioned Bobby Miller and Sheehan. How big of a gap do you have between those two guys?
Well, I have Sheehan as a 3, and I have Bobby Miller as with a ceiling of a high 2.
Okay.
Bobby Miller is disgusting, and Bobby Miller is loose. He's long. He looks exactly how a front end of the rotation guy looks, and all of the secondaries have ticked up since he was at Louisville. It's crazy that guy was a Tuesday starter and a closer at Louisville, and now he's like, arguably. Well, I mean, it would be a toss up between him and Reed Detmers. They're both really, really good arms, but it's just kind of crazy where that body is gone.
I love it. I love it. Well, Joe, we appreciate your time, your insight on this. I know you mentioned MLB draft stuff, so go ahead and plug where people can find both some writing stuff as well as some podcast stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into the draft, if you're into international prospects, if you're into amateur baseball in general, you can find me on Twitter at Joe Doyle, at Joe Doyle MILB. And then I've got a weekly MLB draft podcast called Overslot, and you can find all of my boards up to the year 2026 for the MLB draft, which is sickening, over at futurestarseries.com.
Awesome. Well, Joe, we appreciate your time. Best of luck in this non-chill season of your life with international free agency and then the draft. But hopefully you get to enjoy it and we get some real baseball coming up pretty soon. So, folks, we appreciate everybody here joining us. Please check out Joe's stuff. Again, Joe Doyle, MILB on social media. You can find his links to stuff there. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. As always, go Dodgers.